resistance is futile.
Boldly going where no show has gone before. This is The Week in Geek with David D. Squared and Brian Held. Heard live on News Talk 99.5 WRNO and the iHeartRadio app. Here are your hosts, Brian Held and D. Squared.
Greetings, people of Earth. This is The Week in Geek, your source for geek and pop culture news that's trending now. I'm host D Squared with
Brian Held.
Brian Held. How are you, buckaroo?
Oh, I'm so tired, man. I had nights all weekend long on set and some productions that are working here in New Orleans. And
Mr. Set Life, hashtag Set Life,
Yeah.
hashtag LCBH.
yeah, it's been pretty rough.
Oh, poor baby. All right, let's set up the show. We're going to open up with top nerd news as we always do. And since Brian fired Skungy last week, he is a gone pecan, and so we'll do two segments of top nerd news.
Fair enough.
And then we got a great guest today, too.
Absolutely. Just in time for Halloween, we have the twisted Southern horror queen herself, Lyn Gibson, talking about her latest book, The Legend of the Dark Man.
Nice.
Yes.
And then
we'll close out with This Week in Geek History.
All right, but first. And now, your top nerd news stories from around the world, brought to you by the Viridian Tea Company. Find them on Etsy. And now, your top nerd news stories. All right, Brian, what's topping us off today?
Oh, man. Just another day in the world of reboots.
What?
Yes.
Reboots? How did that happen?
Yeah, so apparently Disney wants to reboot the Pirates of the Caribbean, franchise. I mean, it's like, oh, come on.
Well, all right. Here's the thing. The last two were really just hot garbage. I mean, the one with the Fountain of Youth, that was, okay, just let it die. But then they did another one after that with, I forgot the dude's name. I just didn't really care about him. I think they tried to go back to their roots with zombie type things, and it just didn't grab anybody's imagination, or maybe they just mined it too much. But the reboot is not going to include Jack Sparrow. Johnny Depp is out. Which
Are you sure? It says he might be back.
No, they're not. They're going to create a new character. That's the only way you can revitalize the franchise. You got Jack Sparrow is now iconic. You can't have someone else play the character.
Right.
It could either be his father or his son or maybe.
So, do you think you'd end up like a Solo situation with the guy who reprised the role of Han Solo? A lot of people seemed like they were put off by that.
Wait, what do you mean?
In the movie Solo that recently came out,
right?
A lot of people didn't like seeing the new guy as Han Solo.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, whatever. I mean, you can't CGI everybody.
Right.
I mean, you have to, if you're going to do something like that, you have to cast someone else. So Johnny Depp, look, you can't replace Johnny Depp.
Right.
But he is just, they need a new character. And the reason that I think, I know why they're rebooting it is because it's a $14 billion or $1.4 billion. It's an obscene amount of billions of dollars.
$4.5 billion over 14 years.
All right. So, have you been to Disney? They got the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. They have one in Shanghai and all of them. And like the one in Shanghai apparently is really awesome. They used a lot of the later movies to make that ride.
Okay.
So like I just came back from Disney, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the ride sort of changes every now and again, but not in any major way. It's really kind of the same ride, but they throw Jack Sparrow in every little room, and then they had Davy Jones like ooh wooga wooga.
Right.
If they can, and I think they will, they're going to try to create some new characters, generate some more interest, new fans, and then update the rides, because the last movie came out, it was a flop. Nobody really wants to see that storyline in the ride. You know what I'm saying? And so if they can find a way to update it, reboot it, it keeps the ride fresh, that they don't have to make up a brand new ride for them. They just change out all the animatronics and video stuff they got in there. And then you just swap it out instead of building a brand new ride. Kind of like what was it? Oh, geez, the Indiana Jones thing, which we're going to get to in a second.
Yeah.
That old Indiana Jones in Hollywood studios for Disney, that thing has been there for what, 12, 15 years now?
Yeah, something like that.
It's pretty stale. It's pretty dated. And it's the same show it was been when I saw it 10 years ago.
Right.
And so they were talking about maybe making a boat ride there. Possible.
I think it's interesting. Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick recently had some talks to write the script. These are the guys who were behind the first 2 Deadpool movies.
Right.
And I think it might be interesting. They might punch it up a bit, right? It might be a little sillier, but I don't know. It just seems kind of like, who cares? We're moved on from pirates. Can't we get into something else?
Yeah, but they're not. So we just have to kind of make the best of it. I mean, they're bringing in some new riders. Obviously, they can't be as racy or edgy as they were for Deadpool. They're going to have to make something new and kid-friendly. Yeah, and kid-friendly. So
right.
I think at some point, I wouldn't mind seeing more of that era. I mean, that was the high tides, the pirates. That was a great time to not be alive. Because,
and full of scurvy.
Yes, medicine as we know it did not exist then.
Right.
But it is a very high heroic times, and you could all the storylines you could use. Obviously, Jack Sparrow was such a huge hit. They didn't think that movie was going to be such a blockbuster.
Right.
The Curse of the Black Pearl. They were like, all right, well let's try this out, and it just struck a chord. And put that much money or get that much money over a 14-year period, that's a lot of bank. So if they can reboot it and, maybe tell some different stories in there, kind of like we talked about wanting to see more stories and not the Han Solo stuff. So maybe I want to retract my statement and say I would rather not see more about Jack Sparrow or find out about his backstory because we've mined that.
Okay.
So maybe we'll get some new characters.
All right. Well, speaking of, you mentioned it earlier, Indiana Jones, of course, the whole remake for Hollywood Studios is happening right now, and they're making Galaxy's Edge, right. is coming, and so they don't want to lose their Indiana Jones presence, right? And we know that whole stage show needs to be updated, so they want to come and create this mini Indiana Jones land in Star Wars. I find it interesting. I mean, I think that there's a lot that can be mined there. Right.
Yeah, but we got an Indiana Jones 5 coming out soon. Well, not soon-ish.
Right.
I don't know when it's coming out, but...
And that's probably, a pitch for that to kind of, incorporate that element.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, though, you've been to Hollywood Studios recently when they did the was it Celebration, or you went there for a race with with Mangus?
Yeah, I went for the Star Wars Marathon.
So there's a big chunk in that area. It's just the big giant Indiana Jones area. Then they have this stupid theater that has videos of Star Wars. Like, here, come see some brand new stuff. It's so tired, so bad. It's just like, oh my God, it's like Luke Skywalker, an orphan child on the desert planet of Tatooine, finds love and adventure in the stars. And like, the only reason I went in there and enjoyed my time in there is because it was air conditioned.
Oh, nice.
It's hot as balls out there. And that was it, though. I mean, it was... If you're a Star Wars fan, you don't need to see this stupid thing. I mean, like, literally all it was just, here's Luke Skywalker, here's Rey, here's the new character Finn. Wow.
It was a Star Wars infomercial?
Basically, yes.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, well, that describes it perfectly. That's exactly what that crap was.
Wow. Well, apparently Indiana Jones 5 is supposed to be coming out in 2020.
Okay.
So, I mean, they don't have very long to kind of get this going.
Well, I mean, they've got, like, Universal did that Kong Skull Island. That ride was just kind of, it was a bus ride, but it was basically kind of like a disaster movie. You're just riding through and the bus shakes and you get attacked by, dinosaurs and King Kong.
Oh,
but
okay.
That seems to be the trend that they're kind of going with for a lot of these theme parks.
Is to tie it into a movie?
Yeah, but also make it giant rides that you can get lots of people through. I mean, dude, the sets were amazing in Kong Skull Island. Skong Island.
You're right.
And but like in that area that you've got there, you could tear down that theater. They're building the Galaxy's Edge deal, but you could also repurpose some of that stuff. They got a giant little lake that's just sitting there for no apparent reason. It's just there. And if they put something else like a new ride or just something, anything to make it more, bring it up to date. And I think that's kind of why they're doing it. And it just kind of works well that, they've got this fifth installment coming out, which I don't even know what I think about that.
Does that mean
know what I think about that?
They're going to update Yesterdayland because it ain't Tomorrowland anymore?
No, right. I don't think so. The People Mover is a righteous ride, man.
What's the Starship Earth, the ball that's getting it's getting updated?
It ought to.
Yes, it is.
I don't know what do you do with a giant golf ball in the middle or something?
I don't know. Stick a new coaster in it.
I don't think they have. It's not really a coaster. It's a slow-moving snooze fest.
Well, you go in there for the AC and take a nap.
Pretty much, yeah. Either that or you go ride on Peter Pan.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, you wanted to talk about there's a new animated comedy series for Star Trek that's coming out.
It's the name of it. Oh my God! Below Decks, is that what it's called? Lower Decks.
Lower Decks.
Lower Decks. Yeah. I want to find out about the guy who puts the little yellow cartridge in the food, replicator, and see how the yellow banana comes out.
Yeah, doesn't everyone want to see that?
Why wouldn't you? I could. It would be funny to hear like that cooler talk of, Jesus, Captain Kirk keeps getting us all killed. Take off your shirts. Everyone wear blue today.
Oh, jeez.
But it'll be a funny, interesting take on it. I mean, it's the guys who do Rick and Morty, right?
Yes. There's a writer, Mike McCann. He is on Rick and Morty, and he apparently is a huge lifelong Star Trek fan. He named his cat Riker, and his son name is Sagan. And yeah, what was his quote? As a lifelong Trekkie, it's a surreal and wonderful dream to come true, to be part of the new era. And, I promise not to add an episode at the very end that reveals the whole thing took place in a training program. I like that.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, what I do like is that it's not going to be for kids. It's going to be geared more towards adults, and I think this will probably be a hell of a lot better than what Star Trek can offer us at the time being.
Well, it's obvious that they need more content for their CBS All Access. Okay,
yes.
That's clear.
But this is going to Netflix, though, huh?
No, it's CBS All Access.
Oh,
yeah.
There it is. My bad.
Yes, but my larger question is: do you think this is the shot across the bow at the Orville because the comedic element there?
I don't know, man. The Orville's good, though.
It is.
The Orville is really, really good. I mean, they find a great way to blend, current topics that are on everybody's minds, but also make it funny.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You don't get all preachy. It's just like the perfect sitcom formula where you have fun throughout the episode, and then you learn a moral life lesson at the end.
Well, and you don't want to be preachy. You want to let people do their thinking themselves.
He wasn't murdering us because he's a vicious animal. It's because he didn't understand. Love your neighbor. The end.
Oh, jeez. So is this enough to drop the $8 a month to get CBS All Access, Dave?
It does entice me a little bit more.
Okay.
It does sweeten the pot, as it were. I might actually consider it now. But I think I'll wait till like another STD season comes up, and then maybe I'll spend the money. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how I feel about it. But I think this would be funny simply for the fact that it won't be the stick-up-the-butt Star Trek. It won't be the action-packed new Star Trek we've got. It'll be something a little bit lighter. And, the animated series that Star Trek first put out, that was just for that was kind of like the beginning of extra content. When you think about it, because they couldn't afford it. Just like with Star Wars, the comic books were such a big deal because people were craving and demanding more Star Wars, and they had, it's not easy to make a movie. It takes a while, and so that was something that worked out for them.
That used to be the case.
Used to be, but now you can put out anything you want, and with Netflix and streaming services, it's all there to be had.
Absolutely. So we got plenty more great Top Nerd news, including some interesting tidbits about what we do in the shadows.
Yes.
So
and Frank Grillo.
Yes, Frank Grillo. So guys, stay tuned. You're listening to The Week in Geek on News Talk 99.5 WRNO. Friends, is your morning tea just not your cup of tea? Then try the tea blends of Viridian Tea Company. At Viridian Tea Company, they sell blends guaranteed to make you think outside the box. With such blends as My Enemy's Tears, Goth Librarian, Cyberpunk, and many more, your tea experience will be out of this world. Look for the blends at Tubby & Coo's Mid-City Bookshop, located at 631 North Carrollton, or on Etsy at Viridian Tea Company. Try Viridian Tea Company today. Your taste buds will thank you.
You've waited for it, and now it's here. Get your very own Week in Geek Radio Show t-shirt and help support our show. These 100% cotton black t-shirts with the Week in Geek Radio Show logo are going fast. So don't wait. Go to twigradio.com and order your shirt now. Just go to twigradio.com and get your very own Week in Geek Radio Show t-shirt. $15 up to XL, $17 for 2X and 3X. That's twigradio.com.
Mata Hari, Agent H21, is a spy fiction short story anthology about the famous dancer, seductress, and spy from World War I. Mata Hari, Agent H21, published by Pro Se Productions, has 7 rip-roaring adventure tales about the world-famous super spy that features her battling her enemies by using any weapons at her disposal. Mata Hari, Agent H21 is available for purchase in ebook and paperback formats on Amazon.com.
Do you have a message or logo that you need the world to see? Then rely on the folks at Gretna Signworks to use their expertise to deliver your design. With over 15 years in business, Gretna Signworks can do commercial and yard signs, banners, screen-printed t-shirts, magnetic signs, vehicle graphics and lettering, and so much more. Gretna Signworks also has an exceptional network of suppliers, so no job is out of scope. Find Gretna Signworks on Facebook or visit them at 2125 Bell Chase Highway today.
Welcome back to The Week in Geek. Don't forget, you can listen to previous episodes on the iHeartRadio app at The Week in Geek Radio Show. Here are your hosts, D Squared and Brian Held.
Welcome back into The Week in Geek, your source for geek and pop culture news that's trending now. D Squared here.
Brian Held.
As always, I want to strongly urge you to check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Week in Geek. Check out our website at twigradio.com. Follow us on Twitter at Twig Radio, and the Instagram is The Week in Geek. Now, Brian, how can people listen to this lovely show?
Well, if you missed any part of tonight's show or you want to catch your favorite part again, you can always find us on Spreaker.com or download Spreaker for your smartphone or tablet. We're also on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, the iHeartRadio app.
The
iHeartRadio app, and at WRNO.com.
There you go. All right. Take a listen to this, mateys.
We're werewolves. Not swearwolves. What are we? Werewolves, not swearwolves.
Werewolves, Brian, not swearwolves.
Right.
Werewolves.
Dude, that's, I think, the best line in that movie. What we do in the shadows.
They're coming to America.
Are they?
Are they?
Yes,
are.
They are. They're going to be doing a new show. It's going to find its home on FX, and it's going to be set in New York.
Wow.
Yeah. Although it's not in Manhattan.
It's Staten Island.
Staten Island, yeah.
See, I'm not from New York, but I from what I understand, like Staten Island is the less cooler version or the stuck-up version of New York.
It's more like
the rich people.
Hipsters.
Oh, hipster. I don't know.
I don't know.
I really don't. I thought Staten Island was just like well-to-do people, posh.
I've been to New York once.
I have not ever been.
So
I don't go above the Mason-Dixon. That's my motto in life.
Oh, jeez.
Dang Yankees everywhere.
But no, it's interesting. They're introducing a bunch of new characters. I'm actually very anxious to see this because what is it? Taika Waititi is the director. Yeah. He was, of course, in Thor Ragnarok and did a phenomenal job. But I mean, it's very quirky sort of humor, and I think this definitely has a lot to mine for content.
Yeah, and is it going to be another movie or is it going to be a?
No, I believe this is going to be a series.
Oh, yes. That's right, on FX. Duh.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that should be interesting. I mean, the movie was surprisingly funny. I wonder if they can make it. I'm curious if it's going to be kind of like the old formula of like the monster of the week, if it's going to be like the sitcom where we learn a moral lesson at the end, or if it'll just be kind of, hey, we're vampires. If they try to do it like a what do you call it? A live show like Survivor, reality TV.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that's sort of how the
documentary was kind of like that. It followed them around their lives,
right? And they do say that they're going to be introducing all kinds of supernatural creatures. I'm sure they're going to have plenty of time to dig into that. And there's going to be a new energy vampire.
What?
Yeah, so whatever that means.
Somebody who drains the energy out of the room, like you. You come in, you're like a wet blanket.
Jeez, Dave.
Like, I'm Brian. I'm here.
Yeah.
Eeyore.
That's all me.
Yes, I wish you would just kick it up a notch. Just pick it up. But no, they're currently working on it right now.
Yes, it's currently in the works. So no launch date or anything. But there was some information given out at New York Comic Con is where we're getting this from. But nothing beyond that. But I'm excited. I think it'll be cool.
As well you should be. Now, Frank Grillo, who we have had on this show before, played Crossbones in Captain America, and, he's done the Purge movies. Well, here, Brian, he was with Larry King. Take a listen to this.
Who's going to be the next Captain America?
I don't know, but there have been rumors that Captain America could be an African-American, and it could be a woman, so they're looking.
Would you like to do a subtle, quiet, romantic comedy?
No.
Nice.
I kept that in there because if you've ever listened to the Frank Grillo interview that we did, he is an action kind of guy. He likes being punched in the face.
Yeah.
Like he wants to fight Robert De Niro. He asked me to set that fight up for him. Shockingly enough, De Niro's people haven't called me back yet.
Well,
I'm very put out by that.
I'll bet.
But let's talk about what he said first, where the new Captain America. We all know that Chris Evans has hung up the mantle. His contract has run its course. He's stepping away now.
Right.
Obviously, they're going to fill that void. So it's either going to be Bucky, maybe Sam Wilson.
Right.
But then Peggy, not Peggy Carter, but her daughter.
Her niece. It's Sharon Carter. Yeah.
Yeah. She's not a super soldier, so how would she do that? I mean, they got to juice her up or something, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, Captain America was a shrimp, so all I have to do is get, somebody in a lab and mix up some new super soldier serum. And
yeah, but they've been trying to do that for decades.
Yeah, but, it's now the new century. It's not, World War II anymore.
I don't know. That's a one-in-a-lifetime kind of deal, man. But look, Sam Wilson, the Red Falcon, he doesn't have any superpowers. He's got a jetpack.
He does.
He's the Rocketeer.
He does. But, I mean, in the comics, all the characters you've mentioned have held the mantle of Captain America, which, honestly, I don't have any issue with, right? Because it's like Superman is Superman, right?
Right.
But Captain America is a title. The only reason he was Captain America is because he had the super soldier serum and he had the shield, and anybody can get that. So, yeah, I mean, awesome. Let's get a little change in there and see who's going to.
I'm curious though, because you know how the internet and Twitter works. The outcry. Are we going to see a bunch of like a nerd rage, or I guess I don't know. If somebody's read a comic book, then they ought to know by now. But it always seems you got one dumbass in the bunch who's just like, "Oh, Captain America's a dude."
Yeah, I do think that there is going to be some backlash, but you're absolutely right. And in fact, recently there were concurrent Captain America titles running in the Marvel actual comic universe, where Steve Rogers had aged and he had lost his super soldier ability, and so Sam Wilson picked up the mantle and he's running around with it, and then something happened to Cap and he reverted back to his normal super soldier self, and so they were both running around simultaneously with that mantle doing good. So it's not that big a deal.
Well, right, and Sam Wilson, there's also a female version of Sam Wilson. I forgot what the storyline was behind that, but like parallel
universes,
alternate universes, that kind of jazz. So I don't know. I at least if that they've set it up in the movies where Bucky, it's been he once held the mantle. Sam Wilson, they're already characters, and then Carter. All three of them have been in the movies. They're well connected, and everybody knows who they are. That it would not be surprising for one of them to take up the mantle.
I think that the lady who plays Sharon Carter would be awesome. I think that would be great to see her.
The blonde?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. She I don't know. Her acting just has never been. I've never been like, wow, that's awesome. She's great.
I could see it.
Well, okay, good for you. I can see clearly. All right, what's next?
Has Fortnite peaked, Dave?
No.
What do you mean, no?
No.
But their Twitch viewership is down.
Oh, my gosh. The
Yes.
end of the world. Call the police. Someone's stolen their ratings.
Well, apparently there's speculation. Of course, we're getting into that blockbuster season. A lot of big manufacturers are releasing new games.
Well, that's the thing. With Call of Duty, the new blackout mode,
Right.
I can guarantee you a huge chunk of Fortnite crowd has jumped over there to see what's up, just to look. You know, you've only got so many hours in the day, and if you want to see something new, you know, if you want to learn about that, obviously you're going to start watching that. So everything is going to take a hit. I mean, I bet if we looked around, you'd notice a decline on all the esport kind of things once a new game like that comes out.
Yeah.
But Fortnite will probably takes the bigger hit because it was the only game in town, I guess. Well, the super popular game of the moment.
Yeah.
And right now with Call of Duty being what it is, sure, you got a whole bunch of people going over there, but Fortnite just released a whole bunch of Nerf guns. They've got costumes now, Brian, at Spirit Halloween stores.
Yeah.
You can dress up as a Fortnite rando.
Oh, jeez. That's ridiculous.
But you can buy one of those little hobby horses and use it as a weapon, and they have those at the Halloween stores.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff coming out. In fact, the beta for Fallout 76 just dropped on Xbox One on the 23rd, and then we'll be getting I think it's the 30th that we'll get it for PC and PS4, which I read an article that you might find interesting about Fallout 76. No, this is cool.
All right.
So they're presenting it as sort of this battle royale mode, but do you remember way back in the day when we went to cons and played that game called Assassin? Do you remember that? So for our listeners, the way the game is played is that you go to a convention and there'd be an organizer and they would give you a target. They would give you somebody's name, and then you would have to roll around the convention and find that person and like get them off to the side to where nobody else could witness it and have the assassination, right?
Okay.
You tag them or something and okay, you've been assassinated. But if somebody sees you, then you're caught and you lose.
Right.
They're putting that in Fallout 76 where you can get into a small group of people and then you're given a target and you have to go chase that person. But somebody has you as a target and they're chasing you.
Ah.
So
it's kind of like Paranoia, the Steve Jackson game? Like Killer, Paranoia?
Killer is, yeah, it was Killer, yeah.
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 There was another version like Paranoia. I think.
Paranoia is the post-apocalyptic role-playing game that's the computer is your friend.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get
that's
all
totally,
confused.
yes.
They had a live-action Star Wars, too. It was like, instead of rock, paper, scissors, you used cards.
Oh,
I
interesting.
still have the book.
Yeah.
In case anybody's wondering. But all right, let's talk about Overwatch 2. We had a couple of the teams leaked. The Atlanta team is now called the Rain, but not like Purple Rain. It's REIGN.
Oh.
The Rain. They're like, I don't know.
You're going to reign supreme?
No, it's Atlanta. Atlanta sucks.
Oh, okay. So do you think they're going to replace the Shanghai Dragons as
oh my God! From your mouth to God's ears, I hope they suck worse than Shanghai, if that is even remotely possible. That's what I hope. And then I think the Quebec team is the Defiant or something like that. Or
I'm not sure. I hadn't seen the team name.
Some of the stuff had just sneaked out on Twitter and stuff like that. It just kind of it leaked. Now the Toronto team or the Montreal team, whatever. The Canuck team, whatever they are, they had a big reveal yesterday. I just did not pay attention to it, though.
Okay. Well, I do think it's interesting for folks who have the game, who own Overwatch, via the Battle.net client, which is what you use to log into the game. They're giving you control over the cameras. So if you watch the matches,
right,
you can control your own view of the game. You can have that kind of view that you can move around the match and see whatever, or you can follow a particular player the whole match if you'd like. And I think that's a huge upgrade. I think
I like that. I'm not sure. I think that is for the more versed fan, a fan who is already understands the inner workings of the game itself. I think that would be handy. Like if they introduced this into football, like right now they got the little sky cam kind of deal. That's become a big hit, but you can't control any of the cameras or the angles, but obviously we're talking electronic people versus real life people. But I think it's a great addition for the fan who watches the Overwatch League. I mean, I would love to have this for real football.
So, do you think this is just another block to supplant real football for esports?
God, no. Jeez, where did that come from? Good God. All right, so one last thing before we go to our break and then go to our guest. Brian Held, hashtag LCBH. You're on a game?
Yes. So
in a game? You speak?
Yes, I do. So I posted an article to our Facebook page about the Fallout New California mod that was coming out. And when I first saw it, they were looking for voice actors. I reached out.
Nice.
I talked to the developer, and he was a pleasure to work with. And I actually got a couple of our friends. Kim Trails from the 2 Minute Cage does a voice. And another friend of mine, Melissa, she got in there. And so it dropped on October 23rd, and it is available only on PC. It is a mod for Fallout New Vegas. But I did 5 characters.
Ooh,
yes.
You.
So, and I posted on my Facebook page, shared it out to our page. There's a credits list if you want to see which voices I did, or play the mod and check it out and find me in there.
Yeah, it's basically like an entirely new game now, huh?
It is. It's a supplement to an existing game, but it's a totally new narrative, and it's a prequel to Fallout New Vegas. It kind of sets the story, and I actually haven't had time to play it myself, but I'm going to get there.
All right, let's take our next break and go to our guest.
Yes, the Twisted Southern Horror Queen herself, Lyn Gibson, will be joining us right after these short commercial messages. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Week in Geek on News Talk 99.5 WRNO.
Boldly going where no bar has gone before. The Bad Wolf is a bar, restaurant, and game shop all in one. You can't beat our specialty drinks, fresh food, and a variety of RPGs, board games, and miniature games for sale or rent. Stop by and hang out, or attend one of our regularly scheduled events, all in a non-smoking environment. The Bad Wolf Bar and Grill is located at 2010 O'Connor Street in Gretna, or find us at badwolfbar.com. The Bad Wolf Bar and Grill, where everybody knows your game.
Friends, is your morning tea just not your cup of tea? Then try the tea blends of Viridian Tea Company. At Viridian Tea Company, they sell blends guaranteed to make you think outside the box. With such blends as My Enemy's Tears, Goth Librarian, Cyberpunk, and many more, your tea experience will be out of this world. Look for the blends at Tubby & Coo's Mid-City Bookshop, located at 631 North Carrollton, or on Etsy at Viridian Tea Company. Try Viridian Tea Company today. Your taste buds will thank you.
Do you have a message or logo that you need the world to see? Then rely on the folks at Gretna Signworks to use their expertise to deliver your design. With over 15 years in business, Gretna Signworks can do commercial and yard signs, banners, screen-printed t-shirts, magnetic signs, vehicle graphics and lettering, and so much more. Gretna Signworks also has an exceptional network of suppliers, so no job is out of scope. Find Gretna Signworks on Facebook or visit them at 2125 Bell Chase Highway today.
Join us this fall at Contraflow, November 16th through the 18th, a science fiction convention featuring writers, artists, and entertainers from all over the country. Contraflow will have gaming, music, an art gallery, vendors, and more. This year's featured media guest is actor, writer, and producer Manu Intiraymi from Star Trek Voyager. And the featured author guest is Claudia Gray, author of Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Contraflow, November 16th through the 18th at the Airport Hilton in Kenner. For more information, check out their website at contraflowsci-fi.org or find them on Facebook.
Hello, this is Chris Walken. If you've got a hankering for more cowbell, you can get it on The Week in Geek. Come on.
This is Brian Held with the Week in Geek radio show on News Talk 99.5 WRNO. And in time for Halloween, we are joined by the Twisted Southern Horror Queen herself, Lyn Gibson. How are you?
I'm awesome, Brian. How are all you guys doing down there in the Crescent City?
Oh, we're wonderful down here. So let's start out at the very beginning. The Twisted Southern Horror Queen, how do you come to this moniker?
Oh, wow. Jesus, I was kind of born with it, you know. Always been into the dark side of stuff, so it just kind of progressed. And when I sat down and wrote my first book, which was in 2011, I believe. It kind of got my feet wet a little bit. It seemed like the more I wrote, the more bizarre and dark I got. Started doing broadcast on a morning drive time show in Covington, Louisiana, on the top 40 station there, and they tagged me with the Vampire Mama. So that was my role there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and my publisher hooked me up with an interview with a podcaster named Joe Rocks up in Boston, Massachusetts. And we did an interview, and a few months later he calls me. He says, look, I want to give you your own show. And he says, you're a twisted little bee, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I am. You know, we're sitting there having a conversation. So the title, The Twisted Southern Horror Queen, just kind of evolved out of that. I like doing research, as you can tell. I know you're familiar with some of my work. So I started looking into urban legends and vampire legends and haunted history and stuff like that, and that's kind of my forte on the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show.
No, that's fantastic. You have a book that just recently came out. We're going to dig into it in a second, but you have I guess a vampire romance series focused on Adrian. Is that right?
I do. That first book was supposed to be just a book. And I was motivated into doing that when the last Twilight movie came out. I'm like, oh my God, you know, we're raising an entire generation of kids that think vampires sparkle. This is not the true persona of a vampire. I'm going to fix this.
Nice.
So I sat down and I wrote Soulmate, and it just wasn't finished at the end of the book. So out came Fury right behind it, and then behind that came out Legacy. Yeah, I've pondered with, and I've had some requests from some of the fans to maybe write a prequel. That's kind of on the back burner right now. That might come to be in the next couple of years. I just felt the need to give the vampires fangs back, you know?
Nice, nice. Now, you brought up something very specific, Adrian's Fury, and that actually is personified in a dragster. Tell me about the car.
Okay. Well, my husband was never a fan of horror, and me, if I'm sitting at home in front of the TV, somebody's getting hacked up or there's a demon on the screen, you know, something crazy like that, and he's like, God, I don't see how you can watch this stuff. My publisher sent me to my first horror con to launch the book series. It was Spooky Empire in Orlando, which is a massive con. They have attendance of somewhere between 30 and 40,000 every year. As we're pulling into the parking lot, they're starting the con off with a zombie walk, and there's like 100 zombies in the parking lot, and he just turns around and looks at me. He's like, what the hell have you gotten me into? So he's hating this whole thing. He's sitting there at my table, and I'm selling and autographing and stuff, and somebody walks by and says, hey, dude, there's a car show outside. Whoa, he perks up, you know, cars, muscle cars, engines, you know, gearhead. So he walks out there and looks around, and he comes back, and I said, well, what do you think? And he says, I can build better than anything out there. And I kind of put the noose around my own neck at that point. I said, you know, okay, do it.
Nice.
So he did. And he built the dragster from the ground up, chassis, engine, everything in it except the seat. He didn't build the seat, he bought it.
All right.
But everything else he handcrafted. She's got a story of her own, which I'm actually writing a biography for the car right now. A little brief history on that. She started making appearances with me at cons or charity events and what have you a couple of years ago. We had an event scheduled for, I think, the first weekend in October for a children's cancer charity.
Right.
And that's when the floods hit. And the car was 4 feet underwater in the shop, and our house was 8 feet underwater, so it was just a disaster here. I had to be rescued by the Army out of a hole that I cut in the second floor of our house. But we were bound and determined to get that car there. So I jumped in with the contractors, and we took care of the house, and Big John called over a couple friends, and they tore the car down, cleaned it up. Now, it wasn't running, but he got it tore down and cleaned up and put back together, and we were at that children's cancer event.
Wow, that's incredible. Awesome.
Yeah, we were going to be there one way or the other.
Nice. Well, let's dig in now to your latest book. You gave us an advanced review copy, and it's The Legend of the Dark Man. And I'm very intrigued by this book. Tell me Tell me who the Dark Man is.
Well, again, I'm going to put the noose around my neck.
All right.
I have a ever-growing fan base, but it's global, not local. I have things that are sent to me in the mail by fans from all over the place, Canada, just anywhere you can imagine. I don't get a whole lot of support here at home. They do not like people like me. I live in the Bible Belt, and here I am driving around in a car that's got a skull on the hood, right?
Nice.
So I go to Walmart or walk down the street in Independence, and it's like Mardi Gras because they're throwing rosary beads at me and stuff. But so that book was kind of my vengeance at getting back at the local population for not supporting me. So the town that I live in is heavily occupied or settled by the Sicilian culture.
Okay.
So I looked into Sicilian legends, and I found the equivalent of the boogeyman, which was called the Dark Man. And I looked in Stragaria, which is Sicilian witchcraft, and I kind of blended the two together and built my own macabre, grisly urban legend that was based from out of their hometown. And
I could tell you from what I've read is this is brutally dark. I mean, this character of legend is just wow. He's terrible in his vengeance that he enacts on the populace of New Orleans that you set in this tale. Now, the writing style, I found it was very unique because I felt like I was reading a book that I might have picked up, from the 1800s. Tell me about the writing style.
That's good. That's exactly what I wanted the reader to feel like they were doing. One of the best compliments that you can get, as far as I'm concerned, as an author, is for your readers to tell you, I could see everything. It was like watching a movie as I was reading this book. That, to me, tells me I'm successful in portraying my vision to the reader. They're seeing exactly what I'm describing. So with you telling me that you had the feeling you were reading a 200-year-old book, that's perfect because that's when I based it. That's when the characters were alive and functioning. That was the society and the mindset that I wrote the book in. So that's great. You may not be through it all the way yet, but I feel like I'm already being successful in sucking you into the legend of the Dark Man, Brian.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of getting sucked into your macabre tales, you do a regular podcast where you go through a number of different tales. Tell me about, this format that you deliver more content.
It's gotten to the point, I used to, a year or so ago, I would just have to sit and dig and find an hour's worth of legends or ghost stories or something. And it's not just run across something and portray the story. If I find a legend or I find an old ghost photo, I'll sit there and do the research. And I want to see more than one source. I want to see more than one point of view to know that it's legitimate enough to be put into my podcast. So I'm not just spewing out things that I found. Now, the urban legends, of course, those are legends, but a lot of those are rooted in truth. So I would sit and dedicate a couple days a week into just doing research for a 1-hour broadcast. That was when I started out with the station Armed Radio up in Boston, Massachusetts. And in building my audience, I always tell them at the end of my program, if there's a legend you've heard about or something in your neck of the woods you want me to research, hey, shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to do that. Well, a lot of the stuff I'm doing now are requests that are coming in from all over the world. I've actually had to take some of these messages and copy and paste the message into Google to have it translated to know what they're asking me.
Wow.
So that's really cool. I'm enjoying that. The show started out with about 500 followers. I thought I was doing very well with that, but I'm averaging anywhere in between 6,000 to 13,000 hits a show now per week. So it just kind of keeps going around, and there's certain little groups that I share it in, and once I share it in those groups, those members will jump on it and they share it. They know to look for it on Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on which group it is, because I can't share everything to every group one night. So I have people that are following live that are sharing, and there's places where I put it, and it keeps going. So, last week's show or the week before that, the numbers are still going up on it. They're still making their rounds, so it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying spreading the madness.
Nice. Well, in only 3 short days will be All Hallows Eve. What plans does the Twisted Southern Horror Queen have for this auspicious day?
I actually will be home for October 31st, which is an oddity, but it's in the middle of the week. So I've been doing my shopping, and I've got my permanent markers and super glue and little mini bottles of whiskey laid out for the trick-or-treaters, the little kids. So I don't really get a whole lot of those.
Yeah. No, it's all good. All right. Well, Lyn, we're getting close to a commercial break, so if you would be so kind as to tell our listeners how they can find you out there on the Internet, how they can tune in and hear your show.
Oh, awesome. Stalk me at authorlyngibson.com. That's Lyn with one N. Or you can find me on Facebook at Southern Horror Queen.
Wow. And the Edge Radio US, right?
Absolutely, on the Edge Radio US. What would I do without you, Brian Held?
Yeah, that's what I do. Well, Lyn, thank you so much for taking the time to share your tales of horror with us.
Anytime, Brian. You guys have a wonderful Halloween. Stay safe out there, but keep it creepy, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, gang, when we get back, we're going to close out the show as we always do with This Week in Geek History. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Week in Geek on News Talk 99.5 WRNO. Join us this fall at Contraflow, November 16th through the 18th, a science fiction convention featuring writers, artists, and entertainers from all over the country. Contraflow will have gaming, music, an art gallery, vendors, and more. This year's featured media guest is actor, writer, and producer Manu Intiraymi from Star Trek Voyager. And the featured author guest is Claudia Gray, author of Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Contraflow, November 16th through the 18th at the Airport Hilton in Kenner. For more information, check out their website at contraflowsci-fi.org or find them on Facebook.
Boldly going where no bar has gone before. The Bad Wolf is a bar, restaurant, and game shop all in one. You can't beat our specialty drinks, fresh food, and a variety of RPGs, board games, and miniature games for sale or rent. Stop by and hang out or attend one of our regularly scheduled events, all in a non-smoking environment. The Bad Wolf Bar and Grill is located at 2010 O'Connor Street in Gretna, or find us at badwolfbar.com. The Bad Wolf Bar and Grill, where everybody knows your game.
This is Kate Mulgrew for The Week in Geek.
Just kidding. It's Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, the Major from Ghost in the Shell. Listen, or the Tachicomas are going to get you.
Welcome back into The Week in Geek, your source for geek and pop culture news that's trending now. Once again, it's me, D Squared with
Brian Held.
All right, Brian, it is the favorite part of my show. That's not it.
Yes.
This Week in Geek History.
We're sending you back to the future!
Yes! Oh my God!
This Week in Geek History is brought to you by Jezebel Johnston, Devil's Handmaid by Nancy Hansen, read by Brian Held. Available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. This Week in Geek History.
Yes! Oh my gosh!
Da-na-na, da-na-na.
Oh, geez. All right, first item on my list, Dave, is October 22nd, 1936. Fans travel from New York City to Philadelphia for the very first science fiction convention.
What?
Yes, ever held. Yeah, it was
1936?
36, yes.
Wow. Did they have a fan guest of honor?
No, they did not.
Did they have any fans?
It was a well, I mean, they had fans, right? But it was a small gathering of folks at some dude's house, Milton A. Rothman, and they declared it the first science fiction convention. They followed up the following year in 37, where 30 to 40 fans gathered at Bohemian Hall in Astoria, Queens.
Man, that's horse hockey.
Well, you know, it's.
But I can go back into 1925 and be like, hey, there were 10 people gathered and they read a science fiction book. First con!
No, I mean,
I'm going to go find someone in my family tree that did that, and I'm going to supplant this guy. The De Corbier first sci-fi convention in 1938.
They declared themselves the first sci-fi convention.
Well, see, that they're lying then. I have the paperwork. I'll show it to you next week.
You got to start somewhere, Dave.
Liars. Lies and calumny, say I.
Oh, man. October 22nd, 2006. Sees the premiere of the Doctor Who spinoff Torchwood.
Ooh.
Which, of course, is an anagram for Doctor Who.
Is it really?
It is, yes. If you rearrange the
I've
letters.
never seen a single episode.
It was good. It was cool, you know.
It's available now on some of the streaming services. I don't know which one.
Probably.
Maybe it went away.
Amazon.
Probably.
Because that's how my wife and I get all of our episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh, well, aren't you, Mr. Fancy Pants?
Yes,
What's next?
I put this one in for you. October 23rd, 2001. Apple introduces the iPod to the world.
Yay! Way to go, Apple. Steve Jobs is the best.
Did you have an iPod?
No.
No. Did you have a Zune?
No, I got a knockoff from Big Lots.
Oh, jeez.
I don't even know what it was called. Man, it's driving me nuts. Every time you say October, like 22nd or 20,
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for October 21st. That is my date of birth. I went to the party, I did the Smurf.
Oh, God.
Beastie Boys.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Jeez. Fine. Whatever. Stick in the mud held.
October 24th, 1997. You don't have to guess this one because I think you hate this movie. Starring Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman, Jude Law.
Gattaca.
Yes.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that movie.
Oh.
I just have a strong love affair for Uma Thurman.
Yes, that's right.
I love me some Uma.
I like Gattaca, though. It's a really good flick.
It was an interesting take on, just
Genetics.
Yeah,
Cloning. All that good stuff.
Oh, I finally finished watching The Man in the High Castle, the third season.
Yeah.
It's good, man. It really is a good series. I'm just constantly impressed by it.
Do they take it in good directions from where the book went? Because apparently the book never went anywhere.
No, they're going all over the place with it. I mean, they've developed the characters so much, and now you've got other characters from the other world coming into their world, and like some of them staying in the world. And then they brought in Dr. Mangala. I mean, it's like they have encapsulated that world and brought it to the future so well. It's so well done, and now they're actually Himmler wants to create a device to start sending troops into all the other alternate worlds and conquer all the alternate worlds. So, a Nazi in every pot. That's what he's going for. So I love this show. Love this dang show.
Cool. All right, October 26th, 2009. 10 years after it was purchased, GeoCities, Yahoo announces that it is shutting down the service. Do you remember GeoCities?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Yes. Terrible, terrible stuff. I have a friend of mine who always used to hate, he's like, I hate these websites. You log on and somebody's got like spinning, burning skulls and music playing and, I hate it. Terrible design.
But it's what we had. You work within the confines of technology, okay?
Right, absolutely.
Tell them to stop bitching. That's my job.
All right, last one, October 28th, 1994. Starring Kurt Russell, James Spader.
Oh, Stargate.
The original Stargate, yes.
That's a great movie.
It is.
I mean, and the series was good too, man. I mean, when they brought in Teal'c and that was a great series. It kind of went wackadoodle towards the end, but I loved how they all the mythology was based on the Goa'uld.
Yeah,
it's just like they were deities. I mean, that's just I don't know. It struck a chord with me.
Remember the guy who played the doctor, the archaeologist guy?
Spader?
It was
Spader. Yeah, Spader.
Well, not from the movie, but from the TV series.
Oh, no, I forgot his name.
Yeah. He starred in that sci-fi movie Mega Snake.
Oh, God.
I was talking about it recently.
Lava spiders!
All right, birthdays real quick. On the 22nd, Jeff Goldblum.
Ooh,
yes.
Dead sexy.
Yeah, 23rd, Weird Al. On the 24th, we have John Cassier.
The Crypt Keeper.
Absolutely.
You should have told me. I could have had that liner ready to go for the show.
You'd never give me time to prepare, Dave. On the 26th, Carrie Elways.
Princess Bride?
Yes. On the 27th, John Cleese.
Hey, dude! Like all the Monty Pythons are on Amazon Prime right now.
Nice.
Like all of them.
On the 28th, the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith.
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you to our lovely guest tonight.
Yes, Lyn Gibson, the Twisted Southern Horror Queen.
All right. Till next... What? Whoa, God, what?
I have our guest next week is going to be Manu Intiraymi from Star Trek Voyager. He's one of the guests at Contraflow.
Shut the front door.
Yes, sir.
Oh, look at that. All right, till next time, keep your nerd flag raised high.
Johnson, News Talk 99.5 WRNO FM, New Orleans, an iHeart radio station.